Hey, what is up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here, back with another Market Watch episode. So it has been about a week and a half or so since our last Market Watch, but there have of course been a ton of different things that have happened in that short time span. Obviously with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Extravaganza tournaments happening last weekend, we saw a bit more in terms of meta development and growth, but we also received a full spoiler of Blazing Vortex, as well as the official release of Legendary Duelists Season 2 here in the TCG, and both products have caused multiple shifts on the market. So today we're breaking down those shifts so that you guys know what cards to be looking out for when you guys are looking to pick up cards at your locals or online, or maybe you're looking to move these cards yourselves. Let's get started. So kicking things off, we're taking a look at Galaxy Soldier. This is a really popular card in a number of different strategies. Obviously, it's a key card in Photon since you can use it to dump other light cards from your hand to the graveyard to summon it, and then search either another copy of itself or another Galaxy monster from out of your deck. It's also useful in decks like Cyber Dragons and ABCs, who can use this card to load up the graveyard with light monsters and then use it as a material to go into Cyber Dragon Nova and then Cyber Dragon Infinity. So naturally, with the release of Galaxy Eyes Afterglow Dragon in Legendary Duelist Season 2, the Photon deck does get a bit of a boost, and we're seeing a small number of spikes in different cards from the archetype, with cards like Galaxy Knight or Galaxy Expedition. In the same set, however, we also got a reprint of Photon Orbital, which is a key card used by Cyber Dragons, Photons, and ABCs to search out Galaxy Soldier. So whereas Orbital before was a $40 to $50 card, it is now much more affordable, and with the rest of the ABC deck being so cheap, we were bound to see an increase in demand for the deck's various pieces. Now, this shouldn't really be a surprise, as Galaxy Soldier is a card that has a history of spiking in price at various times in the past, despite seeing multiple reprints. It has 3 different versions available: the original secret rare from World Superstars, which is now around $22 each, and then 2 different ultra rare printings from Battles of Legend and Dual Power, which used to be down at around $5 but are now up at $14 each. I feel like this is something that could have definitely benefited from a common reprint in something like the Legendary Duelist Season 2 set to make it more affordable, but this pattern is something that seems to happen all the time with this card. It dips right after the reprint and then climbs right back up because it typically gets short printed. It might still be some time before we see this card get that mass sort of printing that's going to tear its price back down permanently, so for now I would expect to have to pay at least $10 each for a copy of this card if you're planning on playing it. I do think that with a card like Galaxy Soldier, you can get away with holding on to your 2 or 3 copies that you need so that you can play them in your own deck, but I would definitely consider offloading your extra copies just in case it does see that reprint that finally brings its value back down. The next card that we're taking a look at here is number 90, Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord. So just like Galaxy Soldier, this is a card that shot up in price because of Legendary Duelist Season 2, though it's really just because of the Photon deck. I guess you could argue that it might see some play in Blue Eyes or some other rank 8 strategy as well, but Photons are the deck that is really after this card. So even though Photons aren't really much of a meta strategy necessarily, they're still a really popular archetype with a lot of fans from the anime, and the deck does have some pretty interesting combos that it can pull off. So unlike Galaxy Soldier, this card is typically just played at 1, maybe 2 copies, and it's also really only useful in the 1 strategy. However, it also only has 1 printing available as a secret rare from Battles of Legend Relentless Revenge. Because of this, this card has shot way up in price, now sitting up at $25 a piece, lowest on TCG Player at the moment, with just the 1 secret rare printing that is a couple of years old. I do expect this price to stick around until we see a reprint. I remember back when this card first came out, it was only worth a couple of dollars, so if you still happen to have them and held them through the $8 to $10 price point, I would definitely move them sooner rather than later. With just 1 printing, I am expecting that we'll see a reprint of this card within the next several months, because it did come out several years ago and it is from an in-demand fan favorite archetype. Next up, we're taking a look at Fractal. So this is a relatively new card that just came out in Phantom Rage, allowing you to send it to the graveyard to dump a level 3 or lower beast, beast warrior, or winged beast monster from your deck. So far, the Tri-Brigade package hasn't really been too great here in the TCG. We haven't really seen it used in meta strategies at all. However, in Blazing Vortex, we are getting Tri-Brigade Kit, which is another Tri-Brigade that lets you send a Tri-Brigade from your deck to the graveyard if it itself is sent to the graveyard, so you can really load up on materials to banish for the Tri-Brigade link summoning effects. Fortunately, Kit just also happens to be a super rare only in Blazing Vortex, so the engine is actually going to end up not being too crazy expensive. Also, just on a smaller note, Fractal was actually played in the Lyra-Lusk Tri-Brigade deck that was featured on the channel just last week, played by both Kyle and Ishan. I don't know if this means that more and more people are going to be trying out the strategy, which is going to drive up the demand, or if this was maybe just a one-time thing that people aren't going to read too much into. Anyways, I definitely think that Tri-Brigades are an archetype that have a lot of untapped potential. I think that the idea of banishing materials from your graveyard for a link summon is just kind of insane, so I'm hoping that people will start experimenting with the deck and the archetype a little bit more so that we can see what it can do. As a brand new card, I actually do think that Fractal does have the potential to hit $15 to $20 a piece, very similarly to a card like Dogmatica Ecclesia. If you're wanting to play Tri-Brigades or just play around with the engine, if you can still grab them for under the $10 mark each, I think that I would definitely look at picking them up sooner rather than later, because they could absolutely get more expensive as they start to see more and more competitive usage. The next card here is one that I personally am really big on. We have Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon. So this card is a synchro monster that came out in Rise of the Duelist, and it has always been one of those cards that in theory is insane. It just never really had the opportunity to shine and be used in a meta deck. It lets you excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, take one light or dark monster excavated by its effect and add it to your hand, then send the rest of the cards to the graveyard. It also has a graveyard effect where you can summon it back out, so it gets that extra utility as additional link material as well. The problem is that this card wasn't really great anywhere. You could use it in something like Light Swarms or other rogue strategies, but nothing where people would be looking at it consistently. Because of this, the card was down at around $10, and it looked like the card was going to be a bit of a bust. Now, however, the card is being seen as a tech options in different meta strategies. Specifically, the card is useful if you happen to resolve Gamma on your own turn, since you can negate your opponent's card effect and go into this using the Gamma and Driver. In Dragon Link, you can load up your graveyard with cards to banish or revive. In Drytron, you can hopefully add a hand trap like Herald of Orange Light, and then get cards into the graveyard that are Drytron names. You could even use this card in Eldritch, adding Eldritch or a hand trap while getting your golden lands and Eldritch into the graveyard so that you can banish them to set additional cards from your deck. Anyways, it is a bit more of a situational card, but the option is there for those meta strategies, so we've seen this card climb up in price. It's actually double what it used to be, as it's now just under $20 a piece. The card is expected to be reprinted in the 2021 Megatins, but for now, its price is just going to depend on whether or not it becomes an extra deck staple for these strategies moving forward. If it does, I could definitely see it maybe going up to the $25 or even $30 mark, but if not, expect its price to float down to between the $10 to $15 range. I want to really cautiously call this card a hold because it is strong enough to be a meta card at some point, though we don't know if that point is going to be before or after its expected reprint. One card I want to talk about briefly here is called Trial and Tribulation. So this card is actually a pretty funny card that has been hyped up at so many different points over the last several years. Basically, it allows you to activate an effect based on the number of times you tributed during the turn it's activated. If you tributed 1, you get to draw a card, 2, and you get to add 2 monsters from your graveyard to your hand, 3, and you get to pop 3 face-up cards on the field. Now, in theory, this card does sound pretty cool. However, obviously the big drawback is that these effects do not stack. You get to activate one of these effects, and you don't get to choose which effect you want to activate. I think that this card was hyped initially because of Drytron, but they're a deck that tributes a ton of times every single turn, so basically you'd only really ever get the 3 or more tributes effect, which would let you pop 3 cards on the field. That's pretty dead if you're going first, and you probably won't get to do much with it going second anyways, since it isn't gonna pop until the end phase of the turn. And if you're only tributing once or twice, with Drytrons you're probably in a losing situation already. Anyways, this card was hyped up a week or so ago, especially because it just has one secret rare printing from way back in Galactic Overload, which is a core set, and as a result it was up at $10 to $12 each. However, I think that people started thinking about it and realized that this card just isn't very good, so it got relisted and it's now back down to $4 to $5 each. Honestly, I think that this is still a bit too much for the card, and we probably would see it reprinted first before it ever becomes useful. If you happen to find yourself holding onto this card, maybe sitting in your bulk or in a dollar binder, offload this card while there's still a bit of hype surrounding it before it sinks back down to nothing. Alright, so this is a bit of an unexpected one. We have Cyber Dragon Hertz. So Cyber Dragons aren't exactly a meta deck at the moment, but they still are really scary and can definitely OTK you out of nowhere if you aren't prepared to deal with them. Now, one of the harder to find pieces of this deck was Cyber Dragon Nashter, which used to only be available in dual power. However, the card was reprinted in Legendary Duelists Season 2 and is now available for only $1 or $2 on TCG Player, and because of this, the Cyber Dragon deck as a whole is actually extremely affordable. Because of this, we are seeing people gradually try to buy all of the various pieces to complete their cores, and the next card from the deck to jump up in price has been Cyber Dragon Hertz. This card has only 2 printings available, the original ultra rare version from Cybernetic Horizon, which is $13 each, and the super rare printing from the 2019 Megatins, which is all the way up at $7 each. It's definitely a useful card for the Cyber Dragon deck, allowing you to add another Cyber Dragon from your deck or graveyard to your hand if this card is sent to the graveyard. However, with so many other pieces getting reprinted in Legendary Duelist Season 2, it's actually one of the hardest pieces to find. To be honest though, I actually think that this is one card that you should still be looking to offload relatively soon. We're getting the Cyber Style Structure deck coming soon, which is some sort of cross between Cyber Dragons and the Cyber Dark cards. I don't know exactly what the deck is going to be containing, but there's definitely a possibility that we could see Hertz reprinted in the Structure deck since it wasn't in the Season 2 box. I think that if you want to play Cyber Dragons, hold on to the set or so that you have, since it's not guaranteed that you're gonna be seeing that reprint anytime soon, but I definitely look at selling off your extra copies that you happen to have lying around while they're at this hyped up price, because if the card does get reprinted, it will almost definitely tank back down in price, and holding on to the card through that definitely hurts. Okay, so this card is no stranger to being talked about here on Market Watch. We have Prank Kids Place, so I'm sure you guys all know about this card by now. It's pretty basic. It allows you to search for a Prank Kids monster on activation, and also allows you to chain block your Prank Kids when you use them as fusion or link materials. So at the extravaganza last weekend, Prank Kids actually did pretty well at the event. As we saw in the deck profile on the channel just last week, Henko Chow actually piloted them to an undefeated performance. We've also seen the emergence recently of Adamancipator Prank Kids, a new hybrid deck that I'd imagine is pretty scary to have to play against. I personally don't know. Both Adamancipators and Prank Kids are too complicated for me to play, so I don't know how I would survive trying to play the two engines together. Anyways, whenever you talk about Prank Kids doing well, Place is always the card that seems to jump up in price, and in this case we've seen Place go from about $14-ish to now being about $20 a piece. However, I think that Place is a card that I would be looking to offload as soon as possible. I feel like we see the same pattern with Prank Kids Place every single time. The deck does well, the card spikes in price, but after that, the deck doesn't see any results for a couple of months and the card falls back down. Because of that, I'm of the opinion that you should be selling your Prank Kids Place on these highs unless you really want to play the deck and think it's going to continue to perform well in your hands. Also keep in mind that Hidden Summoners is a set that is well over 2 years old, so it's not unrealistic for us to expect Prank Kids Place to be reprinted in the March reprint set or maybe in an OTS tournament pack. As cool as the strategy is, we just haven't seen the meta at the point where the deck is able to perform consistently, so I believe that you should be offloading the card while it's at this inflated price. And finally, the last card that I want to talk about in today's episode is Solemn Strike. We are finally no longer in a meta that is all about combo decks. Last format with cards like Link Ross and Smoke Grenade of the Thief running around, you almost had to be playing a combo deck if you wanted to do well. Now, however, we are in a format that is much slower in terms of pace, and we're seeing a good balance of control and combo decks. With things like Zodiac, Eldritch, and Altergeist running around, you can play slower decks and still be able to compete with decks like Drytron and Dragon Link. Now, in terms of back row options, Solemn Strike is a card that sees a ton of play and typically at 3 copies. If you think about how popular a card like Psyframe Gear Gamma is, Strike is essentially Gamma but allows you to hit cards that special summon as well, and it can't be negated by your opponent's Gamma either. Solemn Strike is definitely pretty close to being a staple card for these control-oriented decks, the same way that people look at Ash Blossom as being a staple hand trap, and it's definitely showing in the card's price. Solemn Strike has multiple different printings available, but they are going up in price all across the board. Right now, the Ultimate Rares are $145 a piece, which is pretty crazy, but the card has always been quite expensive. You can also get the secret rares for around $8 to $12, depending on if you're going for the Megaton reprint or the original print from Breakers of Shadow. Really notably though, is that all of the lower rarity printings of this card are trending upwards as well, as the supers, ultras, and even commons are about $3 a piece. I definitely think that Solemn Strike is a card that you should own regardless of what version that is. However, it's probably going to continue to be expensive moving forward, kind of similar to a card like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, where it's such a generically useful card, played in multiples in so many different strategies that it will always kind of be worth something. I just feel like this is a card that I should talk about because of how likely it is that we are to see this card continuing to increase in price and become a $5 staple for all versions of the card, because as a card that has received multiple easily accessible reprintings, it can be very easy to overlook. Alright guys, that is it for Market Watch for today. I think that the biggest surprise for me was Legendary Duelists Season 2, which is definitely looking like a really value set. It gave us quite a few much needed reprints, so I'm thinking that we're going to see even more movement on the market as a result of its release. I'm also looking at a number of cards in there as decent investment options, so be sure to stay tuned for that video coming soon. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's Market Watch episode, please be sure to let me know by hitting that thumbs up button for me. Also let me know in the comment section down below what other cards you guys want me to look at here on Market Watch so I can cover them in future episodes to keep you guys as informed as possible. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.